So let's look at this example question right here. Which has more atoms, 1 mole of carbon-12 or 1 mole of carbon-13 atoms? They're the same because a mole, if you recall, is a count, right? So it's like saying which has more people, a dozen 12-year-olds or a dozen 13-year-olds. The 13-year-olds might be heavier than the 12-year-olds, but if you're just counting, it's the same, right? Okay. So since we said that a mole count is just a group count, just like a dozen, if you remember, if you know the number of dozens, okay, let's say you have 5 dozen people or 5 dozen eggs, okay, how do you get the actual count? How many eggs would you actually have? So let's say big N is the actual number of eggs, N is the number of dozens. How would you go from number of dozens to the actual number? You multiply by the number of items in a dozen. Let's call that N sub D, right? So you multiply it by 12 items per dozen. That gives you 60, right? So you would say 5 dozen. If you want to do it using dimensional analysis, you say 5 dozen times 12 items in 1 dozen. Okay? So in other words, if you know the mole count, then if you want to actually get the number of atoms or the number of molecules or whatever it is you're counting, all you have to do to get the individual count is you multiply your mole count by however many you have in a mole. So how many you have in 1 mole multiplied by the number of moles gives you the actual count. Okay? So let's work this problem out here and see what the number of molecules is given 2.00 moles of CO2. Note that MOL is the official abbreviation for mole. Don't use that abbreviation for anything other than a mole, okay? MOL, that's it. If you want to abbreviate mole, that's the only way to abbreviate it. And don't abbreviate anything else as MOL. Okay, so 2.00 moles of CO2 molecules. So what do? Yeah. So you multiply by Avogadro's number, right? So you say 2.00 moles of CO2 times 1 mole of CO2 molecules corresponds to how many molecules? Oops, I got it wrong. Okay. Multiply by 6.022. Huh. Okay. Multiply by 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd molecules, CO2 molecules, in 1 mole of CO2 molecules. Okay? So mole cancels out. So this, of course, this is moles of CO2 molecules, right? So you can shorten it. You can just say mole CO2 instead of moles of CO2 molecules. So 2 times 6 is about 12, right? 12.04. So this is 1.204 times 10 to the 23rd CO2 molecules. Okay, and it has 1, 2, 3 sig figs here, so I need to keep only 3 sig figs, so I drop that 4. It's 1.20 times 10 to the 23rd.